So where can we, so whoever's clicking doesn't have to be up here with them.
Correct.
Right there.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
And what I remember,
Because how is he gonna know?
he was standing here,
He would have to in order to use the
and
laser.
he's not going to be able. He did this with the laser,
Yeah.
and he clicked. I think he did this with the laser over
Here we
here.
go, I got.
Yeah, and he clicked. He spoke from here.
No, I don't.
I don't know how to use it. Allison will, who is
Because I don't
there.
see the.
That's the mayor of Bayside. These are live, by the way, and the webcast is on.
Okay, so I gotta figure out because this is different than the other one.
The slideshow?
Yeah. For the slideshow, yes.
Allison is with the heart research. She's actually talking to the mayor of Bayside in the red. So who's here, behind Brando. Do you know how to use that?
Okay, I'll ask her. And that's just a.
That was just a green laser.
If he's gonna want a laser, he's gonna have to stand
Correct.
with that one and have me down there or do the whole thing here.
Correct. This has a laser in it.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
That, I had that work.
Yeah. Right.
I couldn't get the thing to switch.
I don't know how to use PowerPoint in those things, so let's go ask her.
She's coming this way.
Here she comes. But let's move away from the microphone.
Yes.
This is Diane.
Hi, Allison. How are you?
Nice to meet you too.
So we're going to ask him what the personality wants to do. So the options actually is he has just a laser there. And issues that someone can sit here. Sit here and do that or just do that.
This has range for somebody to be on the front row.
Right. Sorry, the forward is a little worn.
So that, okay, so I'll just tell him what do you want to do. If you want to do both, you can use this. If you just want to do the laser, then I can see it. He needs to probably stand. He's going to use the laser because otherwise my door's going to be different. And he cannot leave the laser.
He should, because he probably will speaks, just to tell me
Go leave and then you sit down.
for their comment.
Yeah, don't give him
Too many options. Too many options.
He was, yeah, he was at Lamar. He had a lot of things. So he walked up and down the stage. And
We have one of those that are, it looks like, yeah, it looks like someone from, on MTV, it's like just there. I do too. I personally love that because it's not a small suite.
yeah, he said it took him a couple minutes. He thought it would keep going, but then after about 20 minutes, he had to stop all over. He just drove
Went with
all
it.
over the stage. And
We can't do that, we're recorded. Sorry.
okay, I will not give him that many options. I agree. Okay, that sounds good. The only thing is
It's up there.
oh, perfect.
Yeah. Something at the end you want to do that.
It's up to you where you think it should be added or if you should wait till something happens. And that is, there was a prisoner and somebody was asking about investigations. And that is the commission. Cannot consent.
Well, I didn't, what did they bring up?
No, it was an elected official.
Oh, no, yeah.
So
no,
we're just gonna make
I'll-
sure
no,
tonight.
No, I would cut it off. I know that.
Okay, then I'm not worried. You do it that way.
No, I know how to do
That was one thing like,
No, I actually I thought of that last night when I saw who was showing up. Yeah.
they might.
Yeah, that's definitely on my
You
radar.
can't keep
That he
just
might have
to
That's gotta be hard. You have to know your stuff, yeah.
I would say, well, you would be in this setting.
Have you talked to him?
Yes, I saw him earlier.
All right, so we're going over your logistics. So the first thing is it must stay between the timer and the way you get out of camera.
The camera, because of the shape of the room,
And it's
tight.
on now. It's on and the mics are on.
So
Okay.
this is going.
So be careful.
You need to stay here.
Here?
You can be here when I talk.
Okay.
And then I'll leave, just like how we did it last time. That is just a laser.
Okay.
And then I would speak from the podium.
Tonight? Okay.
And
That
then-
sounds good.
So here's your options. This has both, and you can do it, but it's kind of awkward because it's on the angle. If you want me to press it, I'll be down there doing it, or you can.
I'll
control the whole
I'll do
thing.
it because it'll be showing up on the computer right there. Right?
Okay, so we'll just leave it right here for you.
And that contains a laser as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, it has a laser. This is the laser,
Okay.
and this is worn off, but this is forward.
Okay. Great.
So you got all that. So you won't need this.
That goes back to Allison. I'll give it to her. These are both hers. She's
Well,
got
he
the,
needs-
I'm gonna put it right here so we don't. It'll be ready to go.
So if you get near the Texas flag, you're off camera.
That one.
Got it. Okay. Got
And
it.
they have water for you down
And
here.
there's some. Well, yeah. They're right
Oh,
there
and some
too.
down there too.
There's. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. All right. How was the interview?
It's good.
You're
It was-
on. You're on.
It was
We're
good.
on camera. I'm walking off.
I can say it up front, but I can also just.
She's done that. She's
I mean, I'll recognize it when they start. Right.
Be very dramatic.
No, I don't have any problem interrupting it. And I'm pretty confident that I would.
Recognize what it is.
Yeah.
and stuff.
If I could get everybody's attention, we're going to go ahead and get started. If everybody'd like to come in and take a seat. Good evening and welcome. My name is Tara Driscoll and I'm with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. With me here tonight, as most of you know, is Commissioner Toby Baker. I'd like to start off by thanking the university for hosting this event in their beautiful building. First note of importance, if you parked in the parking garage, there is a charge to get out, and we have passes on the sign-in table, so if you did not pick up a parking pass, please do so before you leave. We go ahead and start the meeting. The purpose of tonight's listening session is to hear comments from the public on the priorities document. This document is available at the sign-in table. Hopefully you all picked that up. Unlike the listening session held last month by the Restore Council on projects listed for funding under Bucket 2, the purpose is not to receive comments on special projects tonight. Rather, we would like to receive comments from the public on the priorities for the Texas coast as we implement the Federal Restore Act and distribute Restore funds. We are specifically interested in hearing comments on the priorities document. That document includes point values for various criteria such as environmental benefits and project logistics. It looks like this, and hopefully you all received one at the table. The deadline for comments is October 9th. We'll continue to repeat that throughout tonight. Please keep that date in mind. You can leave written comments with us tonight. You'll be able to give it to us orally in the second portion of the meeting, or you can submit them online at our website, restorethetexascoast.org. I'd like to give you a little bit of background information about Commissioner Baker. Toby Baker is of Austin, and he was appointed to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality in 2012. Along with his two fellow full-time commissioners, he establishes overall agency direction and policy and makes final determinations on contested permitting and enforcement matters. Commissioner Baker also serves as the governor appointee to the Western States Water Council. He represents Texas on the Gulf of Mexico Alliance Management Team and serves on the Coastal Land Advisory Board. In 2012, he was appointed as the governor's designee to represent Texas on the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council, or Restore Council. That council, established by the Federal Restore Act, is responsible for developing a comprehensive plan to restore the ecosystem and economy of the Gulf Coast region. Before his appointment, he was a policy and budget advisor on energy, natural resources, and agricultural issues for the governor's office, where he was also the liaison between the office and members of the legislature, constituents, the Railroad Commission of Texas, the TCEQ, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas Department of Agriculture, and the Texas Animal Health Commission. He is a past natural resource policy advisor to Senator Craig Estes and the former director and clerk of the Texas Senate Subcommittee on Agricultural, Rural Affairs, and Coastal Resources. Commissioner Baker received a bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University, where he was a member of the Corps of Cadets, and a master's of public service and administration from Texas A&M George Bush School of Government and Public Service. He is also a graduate of the National Outdoor Leadership School and the Governor's Executive Development Program at the University of Texas's LBJ School of Public Affairs. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Commissioner Baker.
Don't clap yet. I haven't done anything. Thank you so much for coming out today. I really appreciate it. I've had the opportunity now to be down in Corpus on several different occasions, working on different things, including yesterday. So I was here yesterday in Brownsville last night, and then and now back here for this evening. Was born in Beaumont, Texas. I grew up. Spent my early years on the coast. Crystal Beach was my stomping ground growing up. It's I have to admit, not quite Port Aransas, but it gets the job done. And I had the opportunity to grow up going there, and I've been passionate about coastal issues for many years. I've been working on coastal issues now for 10 years, starting back with Senator Craig Estes running his committee, where we oversaw coastal affairs. And so it's something that's near and dear to my heart, something I'm passionate about. And I've been blessed to be able to work on these issues for most of my professional career. And there are certain things you remember in your career that, or if you look back over your path, and things you'll never forget. For me, Hurricane Ike was one of those. Another one was Deepwater Horizon. I remember just watching, like we all did, this environmental disaster unfold in sort of the ultimate reality TV, where you could turn on CNN at any hour And it seemed like down in the corner, they just had a picture of the oil just flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And now to come full circle and be here tonight, about to turn a corner, about to issue our first call for projects, it is an exciting place to be. It's ironic that out of that tragedy, we have something in front of us that represents it may not reach the level of a game changer for the coast in Texas, but it definitely is a once in a lifetime or once in a generation opportunity, in that we are going to have more money to spend on coastal projects than I think we've ever had before. And it's all because of that tragedy that happened 5 years ago. So with that being said, I'll get started, and I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. But what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of background about how we got here, a little bit of a background on what we're rolling out this evening, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. And what I'd really like is for you to give us comments on whether what we have done is the right path forward. If you're uncomfortable doing that tonight on the microphone, you can do that through our website as well. So either way, we don't care. But if you have thoughts, we'd love to hear them. So I'll skip that, and I'll start with this slide, because it's a little complicated. There are three main funding sources that came out of the Deepwater Horizon tragedy. The first is known as the Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund. It's also known as the NIFWF Fund, which stands for National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. These represent the criminal penalties that came out of the spill. These have been settled, and Texas will receive a little over $200 million through that first bullet, the NIFWF bullet. It's important to note that NIFWF is a standalone entity, and they make the ultimate decisions on what gets funded here. The state makes recommendations to them, and they can either take our recommendations or not take our recommendations. Everything they've funded has come from one of our recommendations, but they have denied some of our requests. So that's the first piece that's out there. The second piece is the natural resource damage assessment piece. This is a program that's existed in federal law for many, many years, and what it says is when you have any sort of environmental disaster, it doesn't have to reach the level of a Deepwater Horizon, but let's say there's just a few barrels of oil spilled in the port of Corpus Christi. You open a NERDA case against the responsible party, and what you try to do is you try to go in and look at the ecosystem before that event and then after that event, and try to figure out how much it was impacted. So you say, here's what the ecosystem looked like before. We now know that it impacted fish populations. We know it impacted bird populations, water quality. And so now the ecosystem baseline is here, whereas it used to be here. And what we try to do is monetize that gap between the two. And then the responsible party has to pay that. In this case, the responsible party is BP. This piece was rolled into the federal trial that has been ongoing and is now part of the settlement discussions that we're currently in, that I'll hit on here in just a moment. The final piece is the restore piece. To be honest, I don't know what restore stands for. It's that really long piece there, but if you take the first letters, it's very clever. You get restore. That's what the federal act was called. Restore is a game changer in how we treat Clean Water Act penalties coming off of oil spills. It did two things that have never been done before. The first is, typically when there's an oil spill, the penalties, the civil penalties that come out of that spill go into a trust fund, and they're held there until the next spill happens. And then what the federal government does is they pull out of that fund to respond to the next spill. Congress felt like that the penalties in this particular case were going to be so high that they decided to take 80% of the civil penalties on this specific case and create a new trust fund called the Restoration Trust Fund, and then siphon that money back down to the Gulf Coast states. It's only for this spill that Congress has done this. So spills from going forward will not go into this sort of matrix. But this was so big that Congress wanted to put the money back into the Gulf Coast to help the environment and the economy. The second thing that the Restore Act is, it created the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council. I serve on this council and represent the state. The 5 Gulf Coast states are members of the council, 6 federal agencies, and the chair is the Department of Commerce. The council oversees 2/3 of the money in the Restore Act. So 2/3 of the money in the Restoration Trust Fund, or about 2/3, will be overseen by the council ultimately. Texas has obviously a huge voice in that. 1/3 in particular, we have lots of discretion. The other 2/3 not as much, but I'll break that up for you here a little bit later. About 2 months ago, I think it's about 2 months ago, there was a proposed settlement with BP. The $5.5 billion represents what the Restore portion or the Clean Water Act portion of the settlement is. If you take that and split it out, according to the formula in the Restore Act, $4.4 billion goes into the Restore Trust Fund, while $1.1 billion goes into the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund. And then if you break that out, that $4.4 billion, what does that mean for the state of Texas? That means inside of the restoration, the Restore Trust Fund, there's 5 different buckets of money. There's one that we can ignore, that's bucket 4, so that's why you just see these buckets here. What that means for the state of Texas is a little over $300 million in really the bucket that we have the most discretion to use. Bucket 2 is overseen by the council, that's $1.32 billion. Texas will get some portion of that. That the council actually makes the decision on what gets funded. I'm confident we'll get our fair share of that. Bucket 3 is based on a formula that exists in the act that was actually proposed today by the Restoration Council. The formula is based on how far you are from the spill, your coastal population, and the miles of oiled shoreline. It's important to note from Texas's perspective, we are not a proponent of the formula as it is currently written. And I would ask that each of you go take a look at it and feel free to offer your comments. And then finally, bucket 5, $22 million to Texas. This is for centers of excellence and for academic research, which is, again, something that I think is unheard of as far as coastal research goes. The settlement also includes the NERDA piece. So the NERDA money that I talked about earlier, the NERDA case is settled here. Almost $240 million there, $150 million for economic damages. That goes into the state's general revenue fund. This is all being done through a consent decree. It goes out for public comment through the Federal Register, and then the final approval will be issued, we think, sometime in early 2016. The talking point here is when you add up all the money that Texas has received or will receive, we're going to have over $1 billion to spend on projects along the Texas coast. And that's heavily ecosystem related, not so heavily economic related. Restore is the only piece that dips into the economic piece at all. The other ones, that being NERDA and NIFWIF, have to be used really for ecosystem restoration. Obviously, the economic damages component goes into general revenue, so the legislature will have a lot to say, I have a feeling, with what happens with that $150 million. This money is going to be paid to the state of Texas from 2017 through 2031. From the Restore perspective, we'll get a certain amount each year. For the economic damage component, that'll go from 2017 through 2033. So this is what is proposed right now. My instinct tells me that it's probably going to stay as is and probably won't change much. This is what we can expect. What we're here tonight to talk about, though, is the first batch of money, which is not part of this settlement. It's part of a prior settlement that came right after the spill. It came from a company called Transocean. They settled for $1 billion, and that put $800 million into the Restore Trust Fund, and that's what we have at our disposal right now. And get into how that goes, or how that's split up in just a second. This slide, and I think it may be hard to see, but this is if you were to take the Restore Trust Fund or the Restore Act and graph it out, this is the best way to understand it. It makes it very simple. If you look at the oil spill liability trust fund, you leave 20% there, 80% gets split out into the Gulf Coast Restoration Trust Fund, and then there's 5 buckets underneath that fund. The first component is 35% of that 80%. And it's divided evenly among the Gulf Coast states. And this is the bucket that we have the most discretion over. So we can use it for economic projects or ecosystem restoration projects. What we're talking about tonight with this priorities document that you guys all picked up is bucket 1 for Transocean. What that amount is for the state of Texas is $56 million. And so come early January, our plan is to put out a call for projects, and our plan is to put out a call for projects up to that $56 million mark. So we're going to ask for try to get all of it out the door. The second component, or the second bucket, the council selected restoration component, is overseen by the federal council that I talked about earlier. The federal council ultimately makes the decision on what gets funded. Right now, we have a funded projects list that's out. The public comment period for that ended last night, and we should be making a final decision on that project list sometime in December. The spill impact component is the last large piece that comes out of the Restore Trust Fund, and this is again based on the formula I talked about earlier. It takes 30% of the 80% and then doles it out to the states based on a formula. There's a floor in here that says each state gets at least 5% of that 30%, so nobody can get less than that. We'll get a little bit more than that under the draft rule that's been released today in the Federal Register, but we're not going to get much more. And part of that is understandable. It's hard to argue with the fact that Texas was the least impacted when it comes to Deepwater Horizon. The fourth bucket is something we can sort of ignore. It's really federal funding. We haven't had a lot to do with that, but the fifth bucket is important, and part of the reason why it's important is we've actually awarded the Transocean dollars for this bucket, and one of the first, we created 2 centers of excellence, and one of them was here in Corpus Christi, so we were really excited about that, and we were the first state in the nation that's gotten any award letter for Treasury, which I'm also really proud of. But it takes 2.5% of that 80% plus interest and puts it in there for academic research, and that, remember, comes out to about $22 million additional dollars plus interest that we'll see going through bucket 5 as we move forward. So how do you keep up with all this? There's lots and lots of moving parts. I would suggest everybody write this down. RestoreTheTexasCoast.org is the tool that we are using to push information out, and ultimately the tool we're going to use to take information in. Everything you need to know about NERDA, NIFWIF, Restore is on this website. You can sign up for listservs. Whenever we have something new, we put it on there, and you will get an email saying there's something new, go check it out. But the important thing about this website is our plan is this is the tool we will use going forward for all applications. So if you're applying for grant funds, this is the place you have to do it. There's a portal on this website, and that's where everybody is going to have to apply for funds. The idea is it creates a level playing field. Everybody knows where to go, and this will be our tool, hopefully, if we build it right, that we can use for the next 17 years of getting BP money out the door. This is also the place where if you have stage fright or you don't want to, maybe a little shy about getting on the microphone, you can submit comments on this priorities document through our website. This document is not something that we would put in the Texas Register, so we took it upon ourselves to put it on this website. If you have comments, submit them there. The comment period is open until October 9th. So if you hear some things tonight, have some things you want to add, up until October 9th, please go to the website and offer your comments there. Also, if you want to try to get in touch with us, we actually do respond to the Contact Us button Not all not all agencies do that, but we work hard to be responsive. So that is the place where you can get a hold of us. One other thing we put up on there is this framework document. It is something there's been some confusion about it, which I now understand. I didn't understand the confusion at the beginning, but this is a discussion point. This is a place to start the discussion about the Texas coast. It's got a lot of facts and figures in there about what makes our coast special, what sets us apart, things that are important, things that maybe we have that other states don't have. It also has a discussion about the Restore Act in the back. It's serving several functions. One is as a PR document to hopefully get the public engaged and say, hey, here are some things that we're thinking about. It's hopefully narrowing the conversation, getting it focused about, hey, let's get excited about this and think about projects we can go after. It's important to note that this document is not something we will use to score projects. I think there's some confusion with that. So it's really a piece that the public can take and learn from about Texas and what we have, but it's not something that we're going to use when we're actually selecting projects. So just wanted to be clear with that. I think that's in responding to one of Jane's comments from an earlier meeting. But what we're really here tonight to talk about is this priorities document, this one-page document. The ultimate goal with this document was we didn't want to make the scoring criteria so robust and hard to understand that somebody who doesn't work in government or doesn't work for an NGO or a nonprofit can't understand it and doesn't know what we're looking for. And so what we tried to do through lots and lots of work on our end was try to figure out what are the things that the Restore Act identifies as important and try to simplify all that to one page and then put some scores next to it. This is not the end of the scoring process. There's a very large application that will go with this that gets to these high-level themes and ideas. That application will obviously be on the website. But when we are thinking about how we're scoring things, it's going to be built off these themes and ideas. It's divided into 5 categories, and our goal is to get it on one page. When we looked at the Restore Act, what Congress very clearly said was we want to restore the environment, the ecosystem, and we want to restore the economy of the Gulf Coast. And those are the 2 overarching themes in the Restore Act. And so we started there, and you'll see that economic benefits and environmental benefits are weighed a little bit heavier than the other categories. There's high-level themes underneath each of these that sort of build to that score of 25 points per category. It's important to note that these categories don't add up to 100. These categories add up to, I think, 115 or something like that. But the point is that this is not something, we're not looking at a cumulative score. We're doing something a little bit different. What we're really looking at is 5 discrete scores. So we want to be able to compare economic benefits versus economic benefits, environmental benefits versus environmental benefits, and then on down the list. Continuing with comprehensive factors, one of the things that stands out to me on this is community resilience. Are we ready for the next storm? What can we do to be ready for the next storm? Recreational and educational opportunities. If you go to project logistics, is it shovel ready? Where are you on your federal permitting? But then some of these may not come into play because you may be actually applying for planning funds, which is perfectly fine, and we'll take that into consideration. The last piece is community engagement, and this is important to me. I feel like we don't necessarily want projects brought to us that the local communities are not behind. We want things to start at the grassroots level. We want things to start here in Corpus, down in Brownsville, up in Galveston and Beaumont and Port Arthur. We want things to start at the coast level and then work their way to Austin. We don't necessarily want things to start in Austin and work their way to the coast. And so what I want to see is letters of support and community engagement when projects are brought forth. The other piece of this is leverage. Are you bringing money to the table? And that could be city money, it could be county money, but also it could be private foundation money. For example, in Bucket 2 for the FPL, the projects that Texas brought forth, we were able to get a private foundation to come alongside us, and they're funding 10% of what we took forward to the council. It allowed us to go a lot further with our dollars than we would have been able to had they not done that. This is not just on you guys to go out and try to get private foundations involved. Myself and Carter Smith, Executive Director of Parks and Wildlife, are meeting with a number of foundations in mid-October to basically pitch them on why the coast is a great place to spend their money and a great place to invest. So we will be working on that as well, and if you are looking for foundations and for that sort of money, I will do what I can to help connect those dots for you guys. So just keep that in mind. The final piece is this discretionary authority. Before I get into this, I want to talk about the genesis for how we got to these things. It's really a conglomeration of 3 different grant programs. The first is one that exists inside TCEQ, and that's where we're building our rules regarding creating a competitive process. From the very beginning, I heard that we want to have a competitive process, and so that's one of the things we're doing. And so we're doing that through the rules that currently exist inside TCEQ for our grants program. Then we're pulling from the CAP program, which some of you are probably familiar with, and the Coastal Management Program, which is a federally approved grant program that's been around since the 90s. And I think some of you guys are probably familiar with that process as well. So you take those 3 processes, roll them together, and that's how you get to this sort of competitive process that has some discretionary authority laid over the top. This is exactly like the Coastal Management Program or CAP, where the governor has ultimate authority over that, or the land commissioner. And part of the reason why we want this discretionary authority in here is that there's 2 reasons, very practical reasons. The first is when I get a list of recommendations and a list of projects with their scores and how they possibly are ranked and recommended to be funded, I have the ability to go in and look at geographic locations. So if everything is in one area, now if it's in Corpus, you guys would probably be fine with that, but it may not be all that healthy for me back in Austin if all the funding goes to one area. And so we could look at geographic distribution, and does that need to be spread out a little bit more? The other piece, and this is even more important to me than the geographic piece, is let's say we have 3 really good projects that on their own scored really well, and they're all sort of in the same area. And then you have a 4th project that doesn't score nearly as well, but when I'm able to look at it from a 50,000-foot level and I see that 4th project complements those other 3 projects really well and does something like creates a natural barrier or restores a natural barrier to help with the next storm surge that we're dealing with, then I can say, okay, that project didn't score great, but when you put it in conjunction with the 3 projects around it and you view it as one project, you've all of a sudden got something that nobody was actually thinking about that we could fund. And so that's really the idea behind this discretionary piece. So what happens tonight? You guys will give us comments, and then based on the comments that you guys give us, we will go back and put it in our sausage making equipment back in Austin. It's it's highly technical and sort of a mystery how it works, but we will put it in there and try to incorporate those comments into a new priorities document that will ultimately serve as the guidepost of where we're going. But then we'll also take that, and those will go into the details that will be included in the request for grant applications. So when we put out our call for projects, hopefully in early 2016, there will be very detailed instructions and things we will be looking for that will be highlighted in that RFGA process that will all ultimately get to these ideas. And then finally, that will be posted on the website for everyone to see. It's important to note also that the application that is on the website, all of the questions will ultimately point to these higher themes as well. And so that will everything points to answering these questions. So what does that look like for each bucket going forward? For bucket 1, what we plan on doing, as I said, is hopefully in January of 2016, we will put out a call for projects, and it will be a competitive grant process. They have to be submitted through the website, restorethetexascoast.org. So again, bookmark that. It's very important. Once the projects get ranked and selected, we will actually put those out for public comment. So the public will have the opportunity to weigh in and tell us whether we got it wrong or whether we got it right. My goal in all of this is to be transparent and involve the public as much as we possibly can. Once we get that, we will create a multi-year implementation plan. This is required by the Act, and that plan will be sent to the Department of Treasury, and Treasury has to look at it and approve it. Once they approve it, they accept that and say, hey, you're good to go, then we will start submitting applications to Treasury for those funds. Then Treasury gives us awards those funds through the form of an award letter, and then TCEQ will serve as the state oversight, and we will engage in contracts on an individual basis with the folks who receive those awards. And then the oversight will be at the TCEQ level. It's important to note that this money doesn't get downloaded into a state account. This is a federal trust fund. And so the way the process works is we work out the contract with whoever is the awardee, and then when the work gets done, they submit an invoice to us. We turn around and submit that to Treasury. Treasury then releases the money from the trust fund into a state account, and it's with us. By law, we can only keep it for a maximum of 3 days. So it's only with us for a very short period of time, and the reason why it's set up like that is so Treasury transfers the oversight from the federal government to the state government. And it's typical of federal grants. It's on a reimbursement process, so it shouldn't be something new. It's something that most communities and NGOs should be familiar with if you've been down this path before. Bucket 2, this is the council-selected project. Right now, the FPL is out for public comment. We actually released it here in mid-August, and I appreciate you guys turning out for that as well. Based on what that project list looks like, we're looking at $140 to $183 million in projects. Last night was the end of the public comment period for that. So sorry if you missed that, but that's the federal, again, this is a federal component. This is different than what we're talking about tonight, but I want you to know where we are with it. Inside the bucket 2 piece, we have a little over $26 million in projects that were proposed for the state of Texas. The state directly asked for about $18.5 million, and then the federal entities asked for almost an additional $8 million. So out of the 140 to 180 some odd million, I'm actually really happy with where Texas ended up here, because we were competing with the other Gulf Coast states and all of the federal agencies. So if we can continue with this sort of success, then I'm really excited about what we might be able to get out of bucket 2 in the future. And the final vote on this should be taken in December. So we will hopefully know something by then. Finally, the bucket 3 spill impact component, the formula has been proposed. So this slide, it had not been proposed last night when I did this, so the slide was not updated. So just sort of take this with a grain of salt. But long story short, you need to go comment on the formula. It's out now. Go take a look at it and tell us what you think about it. But then once you do that and the formula will eventually get finalized, the process is actually going to look a lot like this bucket 1 process. It's not that much different, except for the federal oversight piece. So what happens is instead of a multi-year implementation plan, the state creates a state expenditure plan, and instead of the Department of Treasury having oversight over it, the council actually has oversight over it. So we submit that, the council signs off on it, and they are the ultimate, they actually would say, yeah, that looks great. My sense is that so far the council has deferred on many cases to the states. So I think that that's the theme that I expect, that if we just put together a good plan, it should be approved rather easily. So, but then once that happens, it looks almost exactly like what the bucket one process looks like. And the way we're going to go out and solicit projects is going to be the same way, through the website with very similar scoring criteria. Finally, bucket 5, as we move forward, like I said, the Transocean dollars have already been awarded by Treasury. We have an award letter. We are the first state in the nation to do that. We created 2 centers of excellence, one here at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They're launching this Texas One Gulf idea, which says that ecosystem health and human health are linked, and when you study one, you have to study both. They're going to be involved in a more robust monitoring system, and then finally they're going to create a searchable database. The way it's described to me is there's really great research on the Gulf of Mexico, and a lot of it's sitting on professors' shelves. It's not, you can't actually get to it. And so the idea is that we could build a database that's searchable, and that it helps with research from now on, and we won't be duplicating effort. We can take what's already been done and build off of it. So I'm really excited about that. The second one was the University of Houston Subsea Institute, and it's actually made up of a consortium between U of H, Rice, and NASA. And we're the only state in the nation, well, we're the only state that's received any award letter so far, so we're the only one who has any center of excellence so far. But we're also the only one who's proposed anything like this. This is, the idea is very high level, is we do not want Deepwater Horizon to happen again. And whatever we can do to keep that from happening is worth the investment. And so what this is focused on is, can we do deepwater exploration and production in a way that's safe, and can we do it with cutting-edge technology, and can we bring NASA in with their expertise in risk management and risk analysis, and partner with Rice and U of H and create a world-class research facility for people around the world and to use. Obviously, Houston makes sense. It makes sense to put this in Houston. There's something like this in Norway. I think Brazil's looking at something like it, but there's nothing like this in the United States. And so our thought is, if we do this, that we could create a real destination, because as you probably know, the easy resources are getting harder and harder to find. And so a lot of where these companies are going is into the ultra deep water, where the risk goes up tremendously, and it gets a lot harder to do what they want to do. And so hopefully we can contribute to that and help keep the whole process safe from here on out. So next steps. This is something that we've been talking about. We don't know, it's not a done deal, but one of the things we can use Bucket 3 money for is planning. There's never been a master plan for the coast in the state of Texas. After Katrina, Louisiana put together a master plan. It gets down to the project level. I don't think we need to get down to that level, but I do think the idea of a master plan that looks at how bays and estuaries are linked across the Gulf Coast and how water quality impacts habitat across the Gulf Coast, and looking at economic projects like the Intracoastal Waterway, where we have wetlands deteriorating, where the Gulf is now impinging on certain parts of it, is worth looking at. Looking at the coast as an entire system, and how can you spend money in certain areas in a way that bolsters the entire coast as one system. It's not something that's ever been done before, but it's something worth looking at. And since we have the ability to spend money on planning and spend some of that Bucket 3 money, it's something that we're looking at right now and working with the governor's office on to see if it's something that we want to do. There's other plans and studies out there right now that we could build off of, so it wouldn't take us 3 years like it took Louisiana. We could take some of the work that the General Land Office has already done, build off of that, take some work that Parks and Wildlife has already done, and I think we could get it done in a much shorter time period. I would love to be able to get it done in a year. And the reason why it makes sense to do this now is that while we're getting Transocean dollars out the door right now, the BP money doesn't start flowing until 2017, so we'd have an entire year to spend on this going into then that 17 years of BP money coming to the state of Texas. So something that we're looking at that you need to be aware of, because if we decide to embark, then we will be back here again talking to you guys about this process. So just put it on your radar. So reminders, before I sit down and let you guys do the talking, please, if you are not going to offer comments tonight on the microphone on the record, please do it through the website. You have until October 9th to do that. Sign up for our listserv. We will let you know whenever anything new comes out. Visit the website. It has all the info that you will ever need. And then if you have questions, hit the Contact Us button, and we will do our best to get you an answer. It may not be the answer you want to hear, but we will work hard to get you an answer. So with that, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to sit up here, and please come up to one of the mics and tell us what you think. Thanks. Do you need that? Okay. Do you need me to turn that off? Sure. Okay. Great.
So again, did you need me? No, okay. This is your opportunity to give us comments on the priorities document, not on project ideas, but the priorities document. Hopefully, I am going to call you in the order that you signed in, and because we are recording this and so that everyone can hear, I'm going to ask you to step up to either one of these microphones and state your name for the record. First up, we have Chad Odom.
I had no idea I was that early. I'm Chad Odom. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Fort Lavaca. We're a resilient city in Calhoun County, and we've gone through many disasters and ecological catastrophes and even war down where we are. So we're ecstatic about the way this process is going, and to be able to tap into something that didn't necessarily directly affect us in a negative way, but able to make a positive out of it. I can honestly say on behalf of the staff that's poured through this and read what you have, that we like the direction that this is going, that we think if you're true to the scoring criteria that you put forth, we can get to a place and submit projects that are going to be good for the coast. And the public input portion of this really breeds confidence. And there are people at home right now listening to me on the webcast as well. So hello, Fort Lavaca. But we're 2 hours from everywhere. You guys should come visit us. We look forward to seeing you in the near future and submitting projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Humberto Almaraz, followed by Yolanda Marufo.
Thank you so much. Is this on?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Humberto Almaraz with Toby Globy Eco Action, and it is a 501c3 nonprofit entity. Toby Globy Eco Team earned the Governor's TCEQ Environmental Excellence Award for the City of Laredo in 2005 for the category of environmental education. Toby Globy's Eco Team is an early childhood curriculum supplement for K through second grades and is designed to teach water quality, water conservation, trash prevention, and recycling. We estimate that between 125,000 and 150,000 students have been exposed to this program. We believe that eco-education at the earliest age is imperative and in many ways urgent. Many of the songs are in English and Spanish as well. Very quickly right here, Toby Globy's Eco Action is the theme of our program. It is a simple grassroots curriculum supplement that teaches conscientiously responsibility, and respect for our ecosystem in early childhood. The program helped accomplish these goals by teaching awareness, action, songs, and activities, and stimulates creativity in simple and fun ways for the children, while keeping the activities very flexible for the teachers or parents' convenience, thus ensuring maximum participation. While children can learn about the environment at any age, it is much better to teach them good eco habits at the youngest age, since they are more likely to remain or retain, I beg your pardon, to retain them for life. And children, in fact, in many cases, educate their families by instilling sound practices in our children during early childhood. They will not only be environmentally responsible children, but perhaps some of them would be attracted to an environmental profession when they mature. We believe that the very young children are a vital part in determining the eco-future of all generations, and while not every child will become an environmental scientist, every child can be an environmentalist.
Thank you. Yolanda Marufo, followed by Amanda Fuller.
Thank you. I've worked with the Toby Glover program, and it is one that has been used throughout Corpus Christi school districts. It is a grassroots effort here. Corpus Christi has also led into other areas of Texas, including Temple, Laredo, and the Valley, and in areas such as San Patricia County. We have used programs, the program of Toby Glover to instill the message of water quality, of trash prevention on the beaches, and of course water conservation, which affects the state as a whole. I want to be able to see how we could look into the educational component, into the priorities of projects, and how that would be an element that would be included to help extend that message to children as they develop and even work out on these oil fields someday, that they understand from a very early age how they can take that message to heart and know that it affects the communities that live around the water. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Fuller, followed by Ryan Fikes.
Hi, I'm Amanda Fuller. I work for the National Wildlife Federation. I'm the Deputy Director of our Gulf of Mexico Restoration Program. NWF will be submitting some written comments, which hopefully you all will find useful. But tonight I did want to take the opportunity to say a couple of things. First of all, I just want to thank you for just being really thoughtful in this process and engaging your staff in putting this document online and letting people comment on it. I don't know if folks really are aware that this wasn't required. And I think it's a really important opportunity to engage with coastal residents from the start. So I think that's fantastic, and I think the end result will be better because of that. And I'd encourage you all to keep coastal communities involved in the process as we continue. A couple of overarching comments, and then one specific on the sheet, on the priority sheet. I know you're planning to flesh out the bulleted items on there, and I would just, echo some encouragement to do that. Just provide, potentially some narrative comments that people really understand what those items mean and can interpret them properly. Another piece is, obviously I understand the need for some flexibility in the scoring process, but I think that we should try to make the scoring criteria as straightforward and transparent as possible. So while this money may or may not be game-changing for the Texas coast, if we just kind of err on the side that it probably is game-changing, we should compel applicants to develop projects that are as competitive and comprehensive as possible. And I think a way to do that would be by having really clear scoring criteria. Also, I think language should be added either here or within the application itself that makes it clear that projects should do no additional environmental harm in the Gulf region. I think the spirit, intent, and language of the Restore Act makes it clear that the goal of the funding is to restore the economy and the ecosystem of the Gulf Coast region. And we know these things are not mutually exclusive, and the achievement of one shouldn't come at a cost of the other. Language that makes it clear that phased projects are eligible should be added. You hit on this tonight, Commissioner, a little bit about planning. So I think recognizing that we want to be creative with this money and try some things that aren't necessarily shovel ready, especially if you're trying to get all 56 million out the door at the same time. Then I think we need to make sure that people are clear that doing studies for feasibility, design, engineering, that kind of thing is eligible before you get to implementation. My last overarching comment is that in being a Restore groupie and going to all of these 4 public meetings, I've seen a lot of really good comments. I've heard really good comments. I've been really happy that people have shown up and have contributed to this process. And while I think that the website should probably be made searchable, the project portal, in terms of being able to see what your neighbors are submitting for projects, finding that synergy, I think will only make projects stronger. I realize there's probably some potential negative impacts by doing that, but I think the positives will outweigh those negatives. And then a specific comment that I want to mention under the environmental benefits section, the bullet that says restoration and protection of water quality. NWF thinks that should really be amended to add the words "and quantity" at the end of it. I think the continual loss of freshwater inflows reaching our bays and estuaries is arguably the most serious environmental issue that we're facing on the Texas coast, and not having enough fresh water mixing with salt water to support these critical nursery grounds has tremendously harmful impacts, not only to the resources that they support, but also to the human communities who rely on a healthy bay system. And since Restore funding is a new opportunity to implement some creative projects to address this issue, that opportunity needs to be clearly communicated on the face of the priorities document. Lastly, we're really happy to hear that the state will move forward with developing a coastal master plan, and we certainly hope that you all will continue to engage with the public in that process as well. And thanks again for everything you all are doing. It's really appreciated.
Amanda, would you be willing to hand in your notes that you read from?
Of course.
That'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think with her sign-in, she did. Ryan Fikes.
Good evening, Commissioner Baker. Good to see you again. And my name is Ryan Fikes. I'm with the National Wildlife Federation's Gulf Restoration Program. Again, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the draft priorities document for Restore funded projects in Texas. Thank you as well for selecting Corpus Christi to host one of these meetings. You just heard from my colleague Amanda Fuller, but as NWF's both scientists, I wanted to add a few additional comments really focused around some of the science considerations. I will primarily focus around the point system and a few details or questions regarding how the process will be implemented. So first and foremost, best available science, or as on the document, BAS, is foundational in nature and should be communicated as such for all projects. I'm a bit concerned that by categorizing BAS under the logistics section in the document might signal that it may be considered optional. And we therefore encourage you to give further thought to how BAS should be considered in all project applications, and maybe that's something that shows up in the actual project application document. Also, BAS, or best available science, is not just an environmental issue, but it is an economic issue. Economic projects, for example, infrastructure projects, cannot be implemented without sound science, and of course require similar NEPA compliance. And we believe that the priorities document should adequately reflect this. The same is true for monitoring. So without this monitoring data, we're unable to measure project effectiveness and therefore accountability of each of these projects. And we encourage the state to consider this moving forward in this process. Another thing that was not evident for me in the draft priorities document was how a review and evaluation process might be implemented. So as all of us know in this room, many state and federal competitive grants programs utilize committees in order to evaluate projects. This might include, but is not limited to, science advisory committees, technical advisory committees, expert panels, etc. We recommend that the state consider, and perhaps you already are in your process, some level of science review for projects. Not only does this promote the best projects moving forward, but it also enhances transparency and accountability in your state process. One consideration that we have might be that the state utilize, as you just mentioned earlier, the 2 recently designated centers of excellence in that capacity. You know, as we stand here at Texas A&M Corpus Christi with the Heart Research Institute leading Texas One Gulf just across the campus, you know, we need to recognize that that expertise is now in the state's hands through the Center of Excellence programs. And lastly, we urge the state to continue promoting, as you have since the very beginning, that the environment and economy are inextricably linked, and having this mentality will continue to effectively and efficiently implement this competitive grants program. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Tom Tagliabue, followed by Jim Harrington.
Good evening, Tom Tagliabue, City of Corpus Christi. First, thank you for coming to Corpus Christi. We appreciate you choosing us as your site. Water was the most injured natural resources from the Deepwater Horizon incident, and improving freshwater quality and quantity reaching the Gulf from Texas should be a foremost goal of the state's efforts because of water's linked to injury and potential for benefit to the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem and economy. Corpus Christi's identity and economic prosperity are inextricably tied to the Gulf and Bay waters. Our emphasis on improved water quality and quantity and economic sustainability will provide the greatest benefit for Corpus Christi and the coastal bend. Our commitment is demonstrated by significant investments in odor control, water conservation, rainwater harvesting, stormwater management, wastewater system consolidation, and long-term water supply. In terms of the priority scoring, first category of economic benefits we think should also include job retention as well as job creation. The restore process should value projects which encourage investment and retain the jobs which achieve the goals of the restore. Many local governments, businesses, and industries in Texas coastal communities face expensive and complex compliance issues which require significant infrastructure upgrades and program adaptations to meet federal and state regulations. Restore Act funds could be the tipping point between making a compliance project affordable by EPA standards and financially feasible for local taxpayers. Additional points should be awarded for projects which assist in achieving compliance with federal or state regulatory standards. For scoring purposes, the city urges a similarly broad definition of tourism based in the framework document to include wildlife tourism in addition to the traditional definition. Additional consideration should be given under comprehensive factors if a project benefits a coastal preserve, estuary program, national or state park. Consideration should also be given to projects that strongly link public access to the coast with environmental restoration. Thank you.
And so Ryan, Tom, and the others that spoke, if you guys are willing to hand in your notes, we'd be happy to take them. They don't have to be pretty. It's up to you. It's up to you. Jim Harrington, followed by Anthony Reisinger.
Thank you. I'm Jim Harrington, represent Apex Titan, environmental consulting firm out of Austin.
Excuse me, Jim, could you point the microphone up a little bit closer? I'm not quite sure it's catching you. You're a little bit taller. There you go. And maybe stand a little closer.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. I was just wondering if it would be, I know bucket 5 is for the Centers of Excellence, which is excellent. But I was just wondering if somewhere in this priorities for restore funded projects, if you could include, probably under project logistics, a research component to a project, if that would enhance the effectiveness of best available science. Some sort of peer review type synopsis of what has been done from a restoration or enhancement standpoint, conservation standpoint, so it can be published and peer reviewed and published. if that would be a component that would maybe boost the project a little bit higher.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Reisinger, followed by Sharon Bailey Lewis.
I just wanted to say that I think that from the funds from the Restore Act, we should look at like baseline monitoring of wetlands and subsidence along the Texas coast. These are two big things that like protect coastal barriers from storms and that subsidence also impacts their systems. And so I just think that baseline monitoring should be taken into account for subsidence and wetlands.
Thank you. Sharon Bailey Lewis.
Good evening, Commissioner, and I want to echo thanks for you to come to the City of Corpus Christi. We are so happy that you're here and giving us this opportunity to comment on the priorities listing. First of all, the City of Corpus Christi generally supports the framework and priorities, but there are some areas which we think that there could be additional tweaks and that they would be welcome. And I just want to echo what my colleague said, that specifically with regard to economic benefits, that you do consider job retention as well as job creation. Secondly, that you prioritize those projects which will assist in environmental compliance with both federal and state regulatory compliance, particularly those areas where you've already identified impacts like TMDLs and SSOs, and also that we look at the comprehensive factors, that we make sure that we're looking at projects that support estuary programs in our bays and our Gulf, and that you consider those in great detail. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else that signed in and indicated they wanted to give an oral comment. Is there anyone else in tonight's audience that would like to give an oral comment? Yes, ma'am. Just step up to the mic. Did you fill out a sheet? Okay. Please state your name for the record, and then we want to make sure that you fill out a form before you leave, okay?
Sure. I'm Kathy Smart.
You may be able to tilt it down. There you go. Perfect.
Too short.
Could you state your name again?
Kathy Smart.
Okay.
Mine is not necessarily, I don't know if it's a form of a comment or more a question, so I don't really know how to submit it. I very much appreciate this guidance here. This is really good. I definitely appreciate that. I am still a little confused, though, on the process you're going to be using on selecting the projects. In particular, who, is it agencies or certain personnel, will be actually doing the scoring? And then once you come up with the scores, will you actually rank them in a document and choose projects based on that ranking? Or will you not have a priorities list like that based on the scores? Okay. The other, that was one concern. The other thing that I basically, as a taxpayer, want to make sure under this program, we've seen in Texas here, unfortunately, what happened recently with the cancer research grants. And this is going to be a great program. I think this is great for the state of Texas. And I want to see a lot of good stuff come out of this. And so I think the oversight, the selection and the oversight are kind of equally important. And so I was kind of wondering what's going to happen after the projects get selected and awarded. Will there be any oversight by anyone? Will these projects have to actually undergo any kind of financial review or any kind of performance measures, or who's going to stay on top of that to make sure that they do what they said they were going to do? So if you could, you may not have got to that point yet because I know you just started, but at some point if you could kind of clarify that, I think that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
I'll do it real quick from what I so the first is who will be doing the scoring. The scoring will be, right now, the proposal is to have a small number of state agencies, technical staff, do the initial scoring. So that would be the trustee agencies, General Land Office, the TCEQ, the Texas Parks and Wildlife, and then a handful of agencies that have more to do with infrastructure and economic development. So that would probably be EcoDevo, the Office of Economic Development, and probably TxDOT from an infrastructure perspective and the large footprint that they have along the coast. I don't foresee it getting much bigger than that. It would come to me in the form of recommendations. So that's what we have proposed right now, or we're thinking about. So they would send those to me through recommendations. Since it's a competitive TCEQ grant process, it's important to note that I can't be lobbied on projects. There's a firewall between me and the project. So in a perfect world, I won't see those projects until I get them in the form of those recommendations with the scores next to them. That's a rule that TCEQ has to specifically help guard against the things that I think you're concerned about. The second piece, as far as selection and oversight, are both important. I agree with you. Right now, TCEQ will be providing that oversight. We have some experience in this. Our TURP grant funding is hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have done, I think, a very good job in making sure that money has gone where it's supposed to go. And we're talking about probably more money per year than we will be getting out the door with this once we get to the BP money. And so we're experienced with it. It's also important to note that the federal government is very involved with this. We've already been audited for our centers of excellence. We had a federal audit with the Department of Treasury, and we got we had that audit before we ever even selected a center. So they were being very aggressive in how they are providing their oversight from the federal level as well. But that's part of the reason why we're doing this as well, is to make sure that we don't get into a situation that you described. So thank you for your comments, and hopefully I've given you a little bit of clarity, but if you have some additional thoughts as far as those things go, please provide those in the comments online, and we will definitely take them into consideration as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate that. One last question, are y'all going to put a time limit on when a project has to be completed once after it's awarded, like things, by 3 years, 5 years, 1 year? Have y'all thought about that?
I think there's a federal requirement, and that there's a 5-year time limit, and that's not something that we do. I think that's federal, and so that's I don't know what that process looks like if you have to come back and basically reapply for more funding at that point. But I think that's a federal law that we will have to abide by as we move forward.
Okay, and I understand this criteria information is going to be used for the money come from Transocean?
Yes, this is using, we have Transocean money available now. That's what we're going to be doing. But the idea is we're going to learn from this process, and then we'll put it in place. Hopefully the idea is we'll take this process, and it'll be the same process that we use from here on out with the BP money.
Okay, and do you have any time frame on, I know we don't necessarily think you have the money yet, but any time frame as to the other money that you might take calls out for applications for any other money?
Sure, if we get this, we're going to start with the $56 million, hopefully in early January. My goal is that we will have award letters before fiscal year 2016 is over. At that point, we will have, if the formula for bucket 3 moves forward, we will have money available there too, that we could sometime next year.
2017, you kind of thinking?
Possibly 2016, but I don't see the money on that probably getting out until this year.
No,
fiscal year
I was thinking more the application for it. So there may be another process later on in the year next year besides January where there might be opportunities to apply for more money?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Smart, will you see Brandon in the back of the room? He'll help you, give you a form to fill out. Was there anyone else? Yes, sir. If you'll just state your name for the record. Did you fill out a sheet?
Yes, and I said no.
Okay, well, I'll change it for you.
So I lied. I apologize. My name is Kirby Brown. I'm with Ducks Unlimited, and we have written comments that we'll be producing, but they're going up through my change of name right now. So I'll provide those later before the deadline. I want to say thanks for your very public process and how this has gone and everything that's happened, but I wanted to get over to basically understanding the formula on bucket 3, because that's really disconcerting to a lot of us in Texas who felt like we had more coastline, according to the Coast Guard, that had impacts from spill than we did for some of the other methods that may have been used. Is that correct?
Yes, and I can't go too far into it, but that's still in there. That's in the formula. If you look at it, it has to do with our coastal population. That's how the council got to what our coastal population is probably the rub. But
They basically excluded Harris County, even though their Coast Guard had identified some spill effects in Harris County?
Well, Harris County is excluded. It's important to note that the way the voting structure is set up in the act is it takes 3 states and the chair to win the day. So we're not proponents of the rules written.
I think it would be very beneficial for the folks in the audience to understand the process to comment on that, because certainly the 4 other states would be glad to split up our part of the money. I would understand that political piling on.
Right. I think my guess is Louisiana feels similar to how we feel. We are putting the link on restorethetexascoast.org. So that is where we were going to put it on there, so you can go there to comment.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Kirby. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, so as Commissioner Baker said, you can give us written comments tonight before we leave to one of the staff. You can do it on the website. All things Restore lead to the website, restorethetexascoast.org. Please visit the website, sign up so that you get the notifications. And again, the deadline ends October 9th. That's the next big day. This evening's presentation, it's actually last night's presentation, which was pretty darn similar, different backdrop, is going to be posted on our website. So if you have friends and family that are just dying to see this and weren't able to participate, they can go and view that. Hopefully you were handed an event evaluation when you signed in. We'd very much like you to fill that out and give that back to us. If you parked in the parking garage, there is a fee to get out, and we have passes, and they're at that back table. So if you did not get a pass for the parking garage, please do so before you leave. And then if you had any more questions about the process, we do have staff here that you can speak to directly. Thank you all so much for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Tyler.
You're welcome. When you're no longer commissioner.
Huh? Yes, I know. Well, when we get to actually awarding projects.
Right, maybe.
We may get there.
Thank you. No, it's better because we're recording when we're note taking, but it will be able to